1, 2, check, test, check.
Check, check, mic, check. Check, check, mic, check. Check, check, mic, check.
Lady Cox real time says boom, so I presume something is happening.
We're up again,
we're up.
But do we actually hear? Do you hear? Do they hear us?
I hear you. Travis says it's working, so I presume we're good.
Okay, yeah, we can hear us both. Oh my god, we solved. This is like the Da Vinci Code. This is the Da Vinci. I didn't read it or watch it, but in my imagination, we just pulled off the Da Vinci Code or Ocean's 11, whatever.
Let's focus on important things. I did make a promise before we went briefly offline. I said
yes.
I'm going to show my fancy coffee mug. So this is my productivity cup.
Yeah. And read it out. Read it out. What does it say? Read it out, just in case.
Get shit done. This is literally what helps you to get shit done, and what does things.
That deserves to be written. And folks, for the chat, I found my whiteboard marker. So, GSD. Do you know what we're talking about? Get it done.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Where did we finish off? Where did we stop?
the adrenaline is really like pumping now. So okay, let's bring it back. So
you know what?
We introduced Armin.
I'm gonna give you a chance to relax a little bit now, because you had that adrenaline rush.
I have the real on-site adrenaline rush. I need a drink of water.
While you're having a moment, allow me to take over the screen and show a little bit of what we were doing last week. And,
yes, please.
That will smoothly introduce us to things that is to be done today. So
amazing.
Let me know
Here,
when
let me switch it on and put you on screen. Okay, you should be on screen now.
All right. So Monday we talked all things Notch when it comes to this project, and today we will talk, or Elvers will talk, all things TouchDesigner about this rig. So the idea was that we would make a 3D scene that would have a 3-screen setup. So in this case, this is exactly what you see now. And those 3 screens would be facilitated with 3 arcade games. All of the 3 arcade games will be built entirely and facilitated entirely in Touch. So basically all the designs are happening in Notch. It's exported as a block, and then it's put on as a display, as a patch in TouchDesigner for further treatment. So let me walk you through a little bit on what we've built Monday, or what we were checking out Monday. So basically we have several controls and we have several screens. So in this case we have Arcade 1, then we have Arcade 2, and Arcade 3. So all of these screen surfaces will be filled with games that Elbers was working on for the past couple of days. Now, the naming conventions is up for debate, so if you have suggestions better than shall not be Pity or Hofster, you're more than welcome to suggest those, and we will reflect them in the design. We're gonna pipe it in TouchDesigner, because these ports are open to be changed there exactly. What else do we have here? So we rigged in several extra cameras. So this is the scene 1, basically, when we pan out through the different arcades. Then we have a Grandma's Tale corner where we will see direct Twitch chat. So Elbers will pipe in the Twitch chat to these screens right here. Then I and Elbers, we have our own chat corner where we're going to be hanging out with the live camera feeds. And by
Look
the way,
at those beautiful faces. Look at those beautiful faces.
Yep, I think this looks marvelous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This whole thing goes live as a broadcast Friday, in a Friday stream. So we're going to be able to test things out, have a little bit of fun, and obviously, well, answer the questions if there's any. Well, then there's a couple of other things. So there's a winning sequence where a grandpa is having a little dance just to show how well you did if you answered the questions correctly, or you won the game. And then we have a game over sequence. Bam.
Which this one is hilarious for me. This one is the funniest. I love this one. So because the dead body falling out of the sky really is great.
So this was a fast-paced project. This was not built from scratch. To be honest, if you were to turn on Notch right now and head to the samples directory, because you have a little hello page that gives you recent files, templates, samples, you will find a VPTV stage graybox project file. Once you're gonna open that one, you will see, well, a setup that is fairly similar to the one that we have here. So basically what we did, we grabbed this as a starting point. We applied some textures, we applied some variations to the geometry, and we ended up with this. So what we have here is a ton of geometry that is optimized. We have interactive LED placements, which Albert will be controlling. We have the game over sequence, the win sequence, and the interactive corner, the chat corner, facilitated right here as a node graph. And of course, all of this will be available for download and checkup Friday. So this is a really, really super fast rundown of what was happening Monday. If you're interested, just check out the recording of the stream. It's already available on YouTube and on... Exactly. Check the VOD after the stream to catch up on what was happening Monday. With that said, I think I'm going to pass it back to you, Elbers. Let's go touch.
Thank you. And that was so that's an amazing highlight of kind of what we were doing on Monday. Like Armin's mentioning, check out the VOD. It's all up there. And so now, if you did miss Monday, I'm just going to spend a couple minutes just talking a little bit about the little infrastructure that we've got set up here. Because as the TouchDesigner person on this project, as the media server individual, as the logic and state machine, and the plug everything to everything person, these kind of diagrams are like my life. Because then I know, okay, well, this is going here, this is going here. So it's always good to have a high-level understanding. So what we've got going on, and the two important parts are Armin's on the left over here. Elbers is on the right over here. And essentially, both of us are feeding our webcams, our screen captures into an OBS Ninja room. If you don't know obs.ninja, highly recommend you check it out. Very cool. It's, if I remember correctly, WebRTC video chat, really built for this purpose of having the low latency, high quality streams go peer-to-peer. So all of our stuff is feeding into an OBS Ninja room. That OBS Ninja room isolates each one of those feeds, sends them into my OBS, which was being super naughty. I actually had to like kill OBS and open it again for our audio to work. So listen, if you're on site and things, don't ever be afraid. Just give it the old wombo combo if you ever need to. Don't be afraid. Inside of OBS, I've got the scene switching going on. That's streaming up to Twitch. We're using Restream, which is then restreaming to YouTube. And then we got a kind of interesting layer on top of that we're going to show you kind of probably later in the stream, which is we have a private VPN set up between my computer and Armin's computer. So Armin's all the way up in Norway. Well, I shouldn't say up because we're basically the same, we're on the same latitude probably. Armin's in Norway, I'm in Toronto, but what you're going to see is using zero tier allows our computers to talk as if they're on the same local network, which means things like OSC messages can be sent back and forth from us as if we're sitting in the same room. You could even send NDI streams, although we don't really recommend it too much just because we find OBS Ninja ends up having a much better signal path than NDI running over zero tier. I can talk a little bit about that stuff after. Also a cool feature we're going to show you later today is that Armin can actually remote edit my Notch block running on my computer from halfway across the world because as far as Notch is concerned, we're on the same local network and he sees my Notch block running. So that'll be a fun little thing that we'll get to today also. Then on top of that, now if we're going to talk a little bit about TouchDesigner, let me close up my draw.io here. And let's take a look. So this is the TouchDesigner project that we've kind of pieced together over the course of a few days. And I would be amiss if I didn't give a special little thanks to my good friend Aristotle Rufanis in the chat. Probably, Aristotle, if you're in the chat, say what's up. He helped me just put together some of these little mini games and just kind of gave me a little bit of assistance putting the project together, which was really good because there's a lot of stuff going on in the days, so sometimes your homies support. Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. I think even we had a chance to meet Aristotle. He came to training in London, I think. It's gonna be nice to see.
He's a good dude. He's a good dude, a hype developer. Aristotle, if you're in the chat, he might not be in the chat because we're also working on something else. So he might be. We might have traded off the busy hands here. But regardless, I'm going to talk about this project, how we put it together. We're going to probably yo-yo a little bit, and I'm going to try and keep that yo-yoing naturally. Where on some things we're going to talk about the high level, project architecture. I think is a really important thing. Just ideas about signal flow. And then we're going to kind of yo-yo from that down to like, here, let's like build a little part of it, or let's set up like a really specific thing, or here's how I set up this specific element. And we're going to kind of, have a nice little yo-yo up and down through that situation. So I think probably the best place to start is giving you a tour of the project just at a high level. And then I think probably where we can really dive in immediately is hopping into bringing our Notch block in and getting that up and running. And I will say, this is like a PSA. Here, let me make sure, just in case. PSA.
By the way, I was just corrected. We were just corrected by Yanni on the chat. He's our team member. He says that Oslo is a little bit higher up than really? Toronto. So I'm actually in the colder place, mate.
That's a tough one. When you're in a colder place than the Canadian in the chat, then you got to rethink things. But
that says we need to fire up things and make it cook.
Yeah, we got to get all of our computers running at max 100%. Oh, well, and Mikhail's in Montreal, so he might even be higher, he says. So, with that said, there's a PSA here, and you might have seen on the last stream a little bit of the performance of my system running, at a lower FPS. That is because this is not a production box, my friends. This is just a laptop. This is my work laptop, which is about 5 years old now, running NVIDIA 970M, if you remember back in the day when they still had the M chips. So I'm due for an upgrade. Black Friday, I'm looking at you, like let's talk. But even with that in mind, you're going to see that even on a 5-year-old laptop, all the stuff we're able to run, just because everything is so GPU accelerated, that even though, the CPU is getting a little bit old now, I think the storage is the PCIe NVMe storage, so that's pretty good. But even on this one chip, we're able to run all this stuff. And what you're going to see on Friday is that we're actually going to move a lot of this work over to Armin's production machine, which is then going to be able to just knock this stuff out of the park, run it clean at super high frame rates, and be excellent. So with that said, let me start taking you a little bit of a tour of what we've got set up in this project. So you can see I've got these 5 areas, or 6 areas I should say. The 3 in the middle here, the maze, tic-tac-toe, and the quiz are the little mini games that we put together. And I guess I can show you. So the maze is a pretty simple maze. You got a ball. You got to get it through the maze without hitting the walls. Every time you hit a wall, you lose a life. And you have to get up into the top left corner to win. Pretty simple. And what you'll see is when we were deciding what mini games to design, and listen, don't worry about judging this for its aesthetics, because we just put something simple together just to work on it. One of the things that we wanted to do internally as a challenge for ourselves was make logic-heavy games, because that's something that's often tricky in TouchDesigner, where people feel like, oh, if I have to put this whole thing together, it's going to be so much Python code, or like, oh my god, I don't, should I use Unity for this? Maybe. So we wanted to take a stab at some of these really conventional games that had a lot of logic and states to them, build those out. And one of the important things that I think is missing in a lot of the conversations when we talk about Twitch streaming and Twitch events is the idea of round-trip command time. Because we all know that as we start hooking up the Twitch chat, we're going to see, you type, instantly shows up in my computer. Now that pipeline is instant. You hit a thing, I get the thing. The problem is that now I do something and that video stream actually gets back to you, but with, a variable amount of time delay. So, and that's why, when we're doing this anxiety-ridden mic check, it was slower than if, I was just on a console and a mixer, because I would have to say something and then wait 3 to 5 seconds to see if, what I was hearing back on the stream was like what I thought I was supposed to be hearing. So that's something I think that you really have to take into consideration, because a lot of times if you don't take that into consideration, you jump into a project and you sell the dream to your client that, oh, hey, you know what? The user says, go, and it goes and they see it. You're setting yourself up for a tricky little situation, because you really got to take into account that stream delay. And that delay is interestingly variable. So not everybody sees the delay at the same amount of time. So people with fast internet connections maybe are in low latency mode. So they might be on the closer to the 1, 2, or 3 seconds. You might have people on lower internet connections. All of a sudden they're 5, 7, even 10 seconds. You might have people that have random dropouts. So all of a sudden they're maybe like 10, 15 seconds behind. So as we were deciding on how to build a lot of the game mechanics for these games, that became like a critical thing for us, which was how can we design these mechanics to take into account that people want to have fun, just like typing and blasting in the chat, but also that there is the reality that there's this kind of like delayed loop that we have to account for. And you'll see as we go through, a lot of the games are very much voting based, is how I put the term together, which means that everyone's blasted in commands and our network is counting the votes and then has intervals. So, every 10 seconds, see which command got the most votes and then trigger that command. And that, even though it sounds really simple, really just solves a lot of the problem, I think, in my mind, for simple setups where people can still feel their votes coming in fast, because then you can have like a little Twitch pop-up that says, oh, bang, 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 commands. But then they're also not expecting to immediately see the visual result of those commands because they know they have to wait for this timer to trigger. So, this is a good example of me zooming out a little bit and just talking about using Twitch as an interactive platform, because I think there are some considerations that we have to have around it. So we've got this maze. That's a fun one. And what you're going to see in a lot of my project is custom parameters. I love custom parameters, and especially this idea of using custom parameters almost like building these mini APIs or these mini kind of interfaces. And this is a big thing that we're going to see today, is that as we're going through things, for example, if I have something in the Twitch chat and I'm, parsing commands, these commands are never allowed to go and kind of tickle, what I call tickling the operators deep inside of another network. So nothing from the Twitch area is ever allowed to come and touch anything inside the maze area. The only thing anything from the Twitch area can touch is this high-level exposed list of custom parameters. And, if I need more things, I'll expose it. If I need less controls, I won't have them exposed. But this is a really big, important thing for me because it helps build these reliable and, I'm not going to say bug-free because nothing's bug-free, like jinx that, like knock on like every piece of like material I have about bugs, just like knock in. But what it does is it builds what I call bug-resilient networks and bug-resilient projects where it's harder to get bugs popping up because you're really trying to funnel down everything into these straightforward command structures and these little interfaces you're building. So that's our maze. We've got a tic-tac-toe game here because, what would life be without tic-tac-toe? And you're going to see this one's an interesting one we'll talk about later, where we tried to do all of the winning logic in chops, which was a fun little challenge for us as well. And this one, basically, you get votes, and you guys are going to be playing, soon you guys will be playing against each other in the chat. Where, you can break off into teams or just go descend into madness, which I always love when Twitch descends into madness. But
madness, please, more madness. It's going to be hilarious.
I know, it's going to be so good. And then as you guys vote for the positions on the board, the highest voted position every time that kind of like little vote counter cycle happens gets the little marker. And then the final game we have here is kind of just more like a quiz show style game where we found an API online, which was, and this is a testament to the internet age. You could basically go online and find an API for anything. And we found an API that has game show quiz questions just like available. And what we did was we fetched, I think about 50 of them here. And some of them are hard. Like some of them are like really, like rabbits are rodents, true or false? I don't know. We'll find out soon. But that was a fun little thing we found, a little API that helps us get the game show questions, gives us true or false questions. And then we have just like a really simple network here that tallies up the votes based on that timer. You can see even in the bottom left corner, we haven't started the game yet, so that's why it's still just circling around 10. But once we start the game, that timer starts to count down. Every 10 seconds it's going to count the votes, and it's going to decide true or false, and you kind of get little prizes as you go along until we finally trigger some of the winner elements or loser elements that we integrated into the Notch blocks. So that's kind of the high level of our three games that we're going to be piping into the Notch block. We have
Yeah, what's up? It's worth to mention that we have another level of chaos where the games will be switched through randomly by vote as well,
exactly.
Which I am the most excited about. That just sounds like it's going to be amazing.
And I'll come to that in a second because we just have this input area. This is where we're going to get some NDI streams coming from my other computer. Actually, I could probably turn it on and just like preview it. But this is going to be my face. And over here is going to be Armin's face. And this is what I'm going to stream into that little chat corner that we have here. So my OBS on this computer over here. Where is it? That machine. So OBS is over here. TouchDesigner is over here. This machine's catching everything from OBS Ninja and then redirecting it out of NDI from OBS into this computer. There's a lot of pipes in this situation, but that'll be fun. That'll stream us into that chat corner. And then, like Armin said, one of the really fun things was we integrated a lot of ways to actually control the environment. And I think actually you were even showing this on Monday, which was this idea that, you know, you've exposed these live camera controls for me. So, you know, just by moving these parameters around, I can switch between the arcade camera, the Grandma Tales camera, the chat corner. Hey, look at us. We're already in the chat corner. And I can do things like switch between the different games here with this slider that controls this camera. And all of these we're going to expose to that voting system, which will be fun to expose. So not only can you vote in the chat for, you know, controlling commands of the game, but you can actually vote in the chat to control which game is active and on screen at that moment.
Yeah, so if you're playing a game, you might be playing it off screen at some point if somebody chooses to see another one on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a pretty fun and like crazy chaos. Actually, so I had to build some chaos blockers in this final version. And don't worry, if you're following at home, you know, I should say, I think Armin, actually, you mentioned earlier, we are releasing all of these projects on Friday. You'll be able to download them, take a look at them, both the Notch side of things, the TouchDesigner side of things. They'll be available for you to use as a reference. So if you're kind of like, oh my God, Elbrus, you're going at light speed here, don't worry. You can reference these later. But by all means, let us know in the chat. You know, hey, chat, I see you, chats. Both the chats, YouTube and Twitch. If you've got any questions about anything, because I know sometimes, Armin, you know what I feel like sometimes? I feel like a lawnmower.
How so?
You get the ripcord going. You know, it's a little bit hard to like get it started, and then the blades are spinning and you just turn it on and it just starts like going.
Yeah. You just get yourself fully immersive and interactive with whatever you're building.
100%. So if you're in the chat and you're like, Elbrus, you're talking at like 1,000,000 miles an hour, take her easy. By all means, just let me know. And I see VJ Dr. Mojo is interested to see the latency in these pipes of chaos. 100%. You know, so we'll have today where we're setting this up, and then on Friday we're going to have kind of like the live performance mode of it. But we're happy to kind of show all those elements behind the scenes so that you can see some of that stuff. So that's our, you know, we can see we got all the Twitch chat stuff coming in here. We'll set all this up. And then the final piece of the puzzle for this is getting our Twitch chat. Now, one of the fun things that we did here is this is actually a component that we had built previously for the Interactive Immersive Championships. If you had caught that was a really fun event. And one of the challenges for it was that competitors had to use Twitch chat to make some crazy interactive immersive art piece. And actually, you can download this separately if you want. If you just go onto our blog at... Here, I got a screen share. I can show you where it's at. interactiveimmersive.io. And you hop over to the blog at the top here. You do a little search in the top right for Twitch. And this Twitch chat in TouchDesigner will explain to you fully how to set up this component, how to get the authentication keys you need, and then even at the end, it's got the full code for the callbacks. You just copy and paste that in your callbacks, and you are off to the races. But also, you'll get that in this download package as well. So, Twitch chat is interesting because I have it set up in two different ways here. I have all the Twitch chat coming in. Actually, we can see here, like as we're all chatting, here it is. There it is live. You know, it's running right now. There's no magic here. It's running. And Mikkel's asking, what's the difference with Twitcher from Marcus? This is much more simplified and very focused on just chat. So this uses the IRC server, the chat server that Twitch has set up, connects to it over WebSockets, and is just really focused on getting those chat messages in the lowest kind of complexity possible. So unfortunately, you don't get things like notifications about subscribers, bits, donations, like all of those higher level elements of a stream. I think Marcus's component does have those because it uses the PubSub framework to get access to that stuff, whereas ours is really just purely Twitch chat related stuff going on. So we get this Twitch chat, and we'll talk about the parsing that it's doing, but essentially, you know, and I'm a big fan of making stuff simple. I don't know if you guys have watched us before, but I don't consider myself a genius. I don't consider myself a very smart person. I'm just a patient person who tries to set things up in the easiest way possible. And you can see here the strategy that we took is we're essentially getting the commands. I'll talk about the parsing script in a bit. And then we're just routing the commands to just click on some buttons for us. So that way, every time we get a command coming in, it clicks on the button. Then I'm in very easy to use chop landscape, and we all know how to use chops. We can drag and drop references. We can drag and drop connective to math chops, count chops. All that fun stuff then becomes really easy because we just did that step of converting our commands immediately into some chop signals. So you don't have to worry about getting this project and being like, oh man, Elber set up like 1,000 lines of extensions. How can I ever use this? Don't even worry. Like, I'm not that kind of homie. You know, we're easy street all day if we can be all day. You know what I'm talking about? And that the reason is because that counterbalances the anxiety when things don't work, is everything else being easy. I think that's some on-site pro tips right there. So with that said, that's kind of the high-level overview of the network. And what I thought would be fun is we're going to basically delete this whole Notch container, and we're going to rebuild it. And this is where all of the integration that I've done with this Notch block, which we can see Armin's beautiful content running here, and we're just going to delete it and start it again. So, you know, in how do you say it? In the name of science? I'm going to hit the delete key. There we go. It's gone.
By the power of a node.
By the power of the node. The children of the null.
Yeah.
We're nuking it. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I was actually about to encourage people in a chat to come back to us with some suggestions for the names of the arcades. We had some solid suggestions Monday.
Yeah.
Children of the Null, Little Birds.
Yeah.
There was Hof Tacto, I think.
Oh yeah, there was something with the Hof Maze.
Yeah.
We gotta check the tapes, and then we were looking for your country music singer name too.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Folks in the chat, if you have Armin's country music singer name, then you know, let us know. So, first thing I'm going to do here is whenever I'm trying to build something in TouchDesigner, and you're going to see this from our networks here, is I don't make these really big, sprawling, like wire catastrophes, as I call them. I like to just keep things really clean, isolated, know what's going on inside of a component just by what it's doing. So I'm going to start and just make a container comp here. And I'll say for folks that are watching, you know, if you're new to TouchDesigner, don't be afraid to ask any questions about what I'm doing here. If you're advanced, expert level TouchDesigner, feel free to ask questions about why I'm using certain techniques versus other ones. And if you're anywhere in the middle, hey, just say hello. I love the chat. I love the chat. You know, I'm here. We're here for you guys. That's what it's all about. So, first thing I do is I give this container a name. I'm going to call it Notch. And then what I'm going to do is immediately set up a global op shortcut. And my God, I don't know if anyone in the chat remembers before we had global op shortcuts in TouchDesigner, but these are amazing because what these allow us to do is from anywhere in the project, basically type in op dot whatever the shortcut name is, and then we have instant access to that operator. No more worrying about like, oh, you know, it's like / project1 / notch / like scene / like game / hello. None of that business anymore. That's really, really good. So I always give, and you can see all the other components in here, they've got global op shortcuts, and I use really easy and simple ones that tell me what that component is or isn't doing. So in this case, I would give this a global op shortcut of notch. That way, from anywhere in the project, I can say op.notch, and bam, I am on here. And then you'll see once we start exposing the custom parameters, it's very easy to say from anywhere in the, I know I'm saying like anywhere in the project, like it's a big deal. It really is. I mean, it is. You'll see once we start doing it, but once we have the custom parameters there, anywhere in the project, I can say op.notch.par, boom, and I've got instant access to any of those custom parameters. So we do have a question in the chat. Claudio, my friend, hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us. You're asking, with 0 tier, can the TouchDesigner or Notch license be forwarded via USB forward like Paperspace does to share both licenses to people collaborating? I think you'll have to test that. I know TouchDesigner is a lot more like open to that kind of thing. I believe on the Notch side of things, I'm not quite sure if it works, and maybe folks, if we got some of the Notch team in the chat, they can let us know.
Yeah, we actually have one of the prominent members of the team here who probably will chip in with an answer, but it probably boils down to licensing and how does that work. And I think EULA sort of stands there somewhere. I would suppose that the licensing is related to a specific end user, which would be the person who is running the machine. So I'm not sure if it would go further than being on location on your machine. I don't know if you can actually share it like that.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, especially with these kind of things, it's better to avoid trouble than get into trouble. So by all means, reach out to Notch support. Oh, and we got, actually Sarah's answering. So you can't share your licenses for third-party use.
Yeah, so basically you have to be the end user of your own license. So
So just keep that in mind with the licenses with Notch. But otherwise, you're going to see, even if you can't share the license, what you can do is do a lot of the fun remote editing stuff that we're going to do. So maybe that kind of like covers that area of needing to share the license back and forth.
Yeah, actually, good point. So with the network editing, you just don't need to give more control to another person than just doing it yourself. Basically, if you're exactly, because you just give extra tasks for that person too. So instead of that, you can just assist and be done with it.
And it's easier anyways that way. Let's be real. Like, sending licenses around is like a thing, but it's also like a pain. Like the times where you don't have to do that, your life is going to be so much easier. So going back to what we got going on here, I got my Notch container set up. I'm going to go inside of it. First thing I'm going to do is make a notch top, and I'm going to point this to our block, which I've got here. There we go. Let's pop it in. And usually you got to give this a moment to load, because the Notch block will load everything into that project into GPU memory right off the front. And that gives you the best performance while you're actually using the block, so you don't have to worry about, okay, well, now I'm going to bring this on screen. Oh no, I didn't load it before. Like, you won't encounter those kind of annoying issues, but you just want to make sure that when you load your Notch blocks, load them all at the start of the project, so that way the project doesn't stall when all of a sudden you want to reveal some Notch content.
Good
so we'll
point.
just give this a moment.
To add to Elbert's points, Notch block is a compilation of Notch engine and design that you build. So basically it's all bundled up and it's loaded on the load up. So you could have several blocks, but in this case, it makes much more sense to have everything in one place, bundled up at once. And the reason why it takes a little bit longer to load up, at least at the first time, is because it's pre-calculating some shaders for one, and the other, there's a ton of textures, ton of 3D geometry, so obviously all that needs to be accounted for.
Yeah, I mean, this is, let's not beat around the bush. This is like this is a big scene that we put together. Like, this is not, you know, this is not like 3 geometry and a screen. I mean, we got multiple texture inputs, tons of exposed parameters. You've got the animated like 3D models that we got from Mixamo. We got a lot of stuff going on in here.
There's a question about data coming in from point cloud and laser scanners. Can it be imported to Notch? Well, it depends on what data PLA. Yeah, there we go. Ryan is much faster than I am. Yeah, you can import it with point clouds. Yeah, and I think the best, probably one of the best formats there would be Alembic. I think that's the most flexible one. Yeah, that's the most flexible one that actually holds point clouds and all that. Back to you.
Great. So we can see already, we got it loaded in. Fantastic. And one of the great things when we're using Notch blocks in TouchDesigner is all of those parameters that Armin went to the trouble of exposing and, you know, basically like giving to us as control handles automatically just get generated here for us. So we can see we've got things for color picking for the LEDs. So if I simply like bring up this color picker, flip through these colors, you know, bam, we're updating those LED colors inside the project. We've got our camera controls here for jumping around, which I remember Alf. I love Alf. Can we take a moment? Pour one out for Alf.
Yeah, this is where we unintentionally align, basically. Both of us have a mutual respect and love for Alf.
Yeah. And we can see all of the presets for the names that Armin put here, but these are going to be super easy for us to take over and change because we can say, you know, change this later. Any of those updates instantly reflected inside of the scene. So that's really cool. And then we've got also our little victory trigger here, which brings on our grandpa. And this one's interesting because as you go through setting up your controls for something like this, you know, ideally, here's my ideal. And Armin, you tell me how much you would enjoy this on a big project. Is we had a nice spreadsheet, all the commands listed, minimum max values listed, intended functionality, just like a nice little spreadsheet. But that we know that never happens. That's not how real gigs work.
Actually, there are some people who are at least trying their best to implement that. So I've heard about workflows where a Notch designer, for instance, would open an Excel sheet and type in all of the things that he's opening. Because for me as a Notch designer, to expect that you will anticipate what I meant by calling winning sequence grandpa is cool is a little bit far stretched. So I do agree this is needed, and I think the more we advocate for that, the more this will become a standard. This is a new medium, so obviously it requires some new ways of communication or passing on information. So this is a very good point. Maybe we should have done that for each other. Well, I tried to do my best with naming conventions, though.
You did really good naming conventions, so it's super easy for me to see.
I wonder if there's a way to pass. Sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead. What's up?
No, I'm just thinking, like, is there a way to pass notes inside from software to software, basically? That would be great. Probably that could be done by exposing text node and writing some text in the design and have an option to sort of trigger it on and off. That could be a way. I'm not saying a smart way. It's a way.
It's an interesting one. That's an interesting one for sure. But one of the things that, until we get to the future time, the better times, the utopia, where everything is listed in the spec and everything in the spec is what you get on site. You know, interesting thing that I always do is I always just go through and check the different parameters. Because for example, this one is almost in my mind more of a toggle. So when I'm thinking about how am I going to control this from TouchDesigner, I'm thinking about, okay, well, I have a value when it's 0, no winning sequence. When I go to 1, Grandpa's dancing. And Grandpa will dance forever if I just leave this at 1. But eventually I have to turn this off myself. Now this is different from the game over, which you can see is more of a pulse kind of behavior where when I go from 0 to 1, it triggers this animation where the person falls from the sky. And even if I leave this at 1, you know, it doesn't repeat or cycle or anything like that. So I have to just make sure in my mind I think about this game over as a pulse, whereas my victory is going to be more of a toggle. And this is a really important thing that I do when I'm working with Notch blocks especially, and actually just in general in TouchDesigner, because this really helps guide you when it comes time to building out your custom parameters that I talked about being so important. So if I was going to integrate this Notch block, first thing I do is go back up a level. I'm going to grab my Notch container here, right click on it, and hit Customize Component from that menu. Now this is going to bring up my little component editor here. And for folks that have used custom parameters, this is going to look very familiar. If you haven't used custom parameters, prepare for the world to... I don't know, I'm not going to give Tenet spoilers because that movie was sick, but I'm just going to say this is like Tenet level stuff right here. So what I can do is first set a little custom parameter page name here. I'm going to call this settings. I usually call these settings just because. And I'm going to start adding some of these custom parameters that I want controls for. So if I go back in my Notch network, I can compare this to my component editor with the list of parameters I have here. So I know that I'm going to need maybe some kind of scene switcher here. So I'll go ahead and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to make a float. It's going to be called scene switch add par. And then what you'll see is if you go up a level and you click on that notch block, I have this scene switcher ready to go here. Now, very similarly to how you do when you are inside of Notch, you can click on this parameter, come down, set things like minimums, maximums, default values, all that kind of good stuff you can set here. We're going to go a little bit more fast and loose today just to set up a bunch of these as we're going along. So let's say we've got that. We want an RGB color. So what I can do is from this dropdown, pick a different type here. And I know I want RGBA. And I'll call this LED colors. I know I want an arcade camera switch, so I'll make another float for my arcade camera switch. And then we can see we have a lot of these text properties exposed. So let's do it. Let's go ahead and start exposing some text properties here. What I'll do is I'll click the little menu, click on str, which is short for string. And I can say this is going to be the chat corner. Oh, we got 2 chat corners here. Okay, so this is going to be grandma tails first. So this is going to be grandma corner name. And then we've got the chat corner name,
So Raja is actually asking, why just not drag and drop instead of typing it through?
You could do the drag and drop. So a good trick that Rajat is talking about is what you can do is, let's say, for instance, I have this text property. And I want to basically just mirror this text property onto my component. What I can do is hover over the name, left click, and drag this all the way into my parameter window here. And if I let go, what it's going to do is create a new parameter, name it after the scripting name, and then I can either choose to bind this immediately so that the values get linked up, or just set it as a Python expression, or neither. So I could go ahead and say, bind this as master.
We were corrected. This is not Grandma's Tales. This is a hologramma, by the way.
This is a hologramma. So we'll change that in a sec. I'll put it here just so I don't forget. This is hologramma. So you could go about that drag and drop situation. That's also a great way. What I find can be a little bit tricky is that, especially because TouchDesigner is auto-generating these scripting names, a lot of the time you're going to end up with names of parameters that say, you know, NCH game name 1, which is not like the most apparently obvious thing that is, you know, for somebody that is not me, is going to be like, oh yeah, I know exactly what NCH game name 1 is. So that's why I still like to mix it up, and I do a mix of dragging and dropping stuff over and just manually creating the elements I need. And for the sake of the stream, we're not going to go through and create every single one. We're just going to create a small handful of them and then just set up the controls for them. So I've got these 2. Let's grab let's grab a game name and a score, because these are fun too. So we can see actually this is game 3. So we can see the score text that's inside of the scene. We can actually dynamically link up to our game to get that data coming across into the notch block where it's getting rendered really nicely. So let's go ahead and I'll say this will be game name 1. I'll make a score for game 1, score game 1. And then what I'll do is I'll expose victory and game over, because I know those are going to be things that other components in this network are going to be trying to like interact with. So I'll give this a toggle we mentioned for victory. So I'll call this victory. And I want to make a pulse button for game over. So I'll select pulse, and this will be game over. So I can go ahead and close that. And the cool thing now is that I'm going to have all of these easily exposed in that kind of API mindset that we're talking about. And the reason this is really important to me is because now what I can do is open up my parameters here and start mapping these parameters to just take over these native Notch exposed properties. And the reason I like this a lot is because then if anything ever changes inside of this part of the project, so let me give you a good example here. Let's say, for example, let's do the game over one, because that's an easy one. So I got this game over pulse button, and I want to control this game over element. So let's say, for example, I did this without my custom parameters, and I had, something from outside of the network clicking on this game over button. What would happen if, because of design iteration, I go back to Armin and I say, hey, Armin, can you change the game over button to do something else? We really need to act different. Or can you just update the name? What's going to happen is if any of those things happen, some element of this block or this network is going to change enough where anything that was outside of it trying to find this parameter is going to start throwing errors. And then we got to go on a good old classic bug hunt and say, why is this error happening? Where is it coming from? How do I fix it? Then I'm sure you've all experienced that thing where you have to go through a network and basically remove 1 or 2 characters from all the parameter names because now they're different. These are all the things we can avoid, because once we know that we have the custom parameter set up, what I can do is say, everyone just click on game over pulse. Then inside the network, what I can do is set up something like a parameter chop, which is a really great tool here. You can see it when I have it in its default state, it's showing me all of the channels of the custom parameters that I've built here. And one of the great things is, so for example, you can see as I toggle on and off the victory here, I get my victory channel going on and off. Clicking the game pulse button gives me a quick pulse on my game over. What I can do now is know that my interface never is going to change. Regardless of what happens on the inner workings of it, my interface is always stable. So anything changes on the inside, it just becomes me going on the inside, making the appropriate connection. Say, okay, well, this interface element used to go here, now it goes here. Nothing else in the project, and especially once you start talking about these big complex projects, nothing else in the project is going to break. Nothing else is going to need reformatting. Nothing else is going to need to have variable names updated. Everything else can stay stable. And that's really what I was mentioning earlier about this whole bug resilient way of working. So if we do a simple example here, let's just pipe this victory and game over toggles right to our Notch block. I could do something as easy as use a select chop to grab those 2 elements. And I can say, grab the channel names here. I want victory and I want game over. Put those into a null chop before I reference them. And then I can go to my Notch top here, click the little plus button in the bottom right of my chop, hover my mouse over a channel name, and drag and drop right onto the parameter I want control of and hit chop reference. I can do that for my game over as well. And now we'll see that just with a few clicks, I can easily control that element from my custom parameter. And that means as I start building the other parts of the project and I start talking about things like, okay, well, Twitch chat's seeing some votes, after this many votes, do this. The do this part is really going to be as easy as say op.notch .par. Click this thing or change this value. And that's going to be a really easy way to work. And I'm all about making ways of working that reduce my brain cycles. There's nothing I hate more than having to sit there and think about what was the variable name for this or for that thing. That's like a waste of brain energy. You should make your projects in a way where it's so obvious that you're like, oh yeah, I need to get to the notch parameters, op.notch. I don't have to think about it. That's the way you want to be working. And that's the way you're going to be able to work long hours on site, let's be real here, without getting drained in the brain from all the times you got to think about the variable names. Now, probably some folks in the chat who are more experienced TouchDesigner folks might be thinking to yourself, hey, you know what, do I have to use parameter chop? What if I use bindings? What if I reference this directly to the parameter? All of those things are valid things you can do. So for example, what I could do instead of going through parameter chop, let's say I want to control game over directly from my little pulse button here. I could grab its name, click and drag it onto game over, and hit bind. And you'll see you get that purple text there. And now we have a very similar effect where my button's controlling that. I think that depends on your workflow and it's more of a personal preference. So for example, a lot of the time I still like using chops and chop networks for this kind of thing, because then it means if for any reason I ever have to go back and insert a piece of processing in here, I don't have to unhook my bind, then set it up, and then, you know, connect it up. I already have everything exposed here. I've got a null. I've got my select. It's very easy for me to drop some processing into the middle of this little chain here. Now we can also do very similar things with our game names here. So for example, we know hologramma is my grandma corner name. So I could go ahead, type in here hologramma, and then however you prefer to do this, you know, you can take this grandma corner name, drag and drop it onto the parameter here, hit bind, you get that parameter coming in real time. So now if I change this, actually, it would be good if we go there and look at it while we're changing it. So I could be looking at this and changing it, and all of the parameters that I'm changing on my custom parameters get piped straight down into the Notch block. So I can do the same for, let's say, chat corner. I'll use some bindings for that. And I'll say, did we have a name for chat corner, Armin? Do you remember if we had a chat corner name?
I think that's one thing that was left there without the name, but I'm sure that a suggestion will come at some point. I really like this idea of just virtually dragging through the parameter from one to the other. I so relate to this from Notch because we do the same thing when we are aligning things like with modifiers. It's great. Yeah. This is awesome.
And I think that's the thing that a lot of people maybe probably don't realize about both Touch and Notch is how much of the things really can just be dragged and dropped. You know, especially like you're saying for modifiers, grab the output, drop it on a property like connection. You know, similar with TouchDesigner. I'm a designer, man.
For me, everything has to be visual. Like that's how I learn. That's how I work. So if I can just point things, I'm good.
So I think if you are new to either of these platforms, don't be afraid to like try to drag and drop something, because there's a high chance that it very well may work. So interestingly, we're going through this, and actually we see a little interesting thing here where I have chat corner question mark, but it's getting cut off in the frame. Now this is a cool little thing that you can do if you're sending text from TouchDesigner to Notch, is I can actually add the new lines on my side and Notch respects them. But I just have to do it with the Python new line format. So for example, if I wanted to break this string at the end of chat, what I could do is open up my little parameter here, switch it to the expression mode by clicking the little blue box. Don't worry if it errors at first. That's because we haven't finished our little Python expression. What I'm going to do now is I have to turn this into a Python string, so I'm going to add quotation marks around it on the front and end. And you'll see if you hit enter with that, it goes back to working. But now what I can do is in between chat and corner, instead of putting a space, I can put this really helpful character, which is a backslash and an N. So one of these bad boys, backslash and an N. Let me make this like that way. Backslash N.
I love the fact that the board came handy.
This is the first.
Right That's great.
Can I get some hearts in the chat? The hearts in the chat for the first time this whiteboard has ever been used productively. Here, I gotta move my head out of the way a little bit. Shout out to the boards. Shout out to the board. I am terrified of breaking this board, but I'm not good with glass. Like, I don't trust myself as a human. So I've already run into this a couple times and been like, oh God, I'm glad it didn't break. But I digress. What we can do is instead of putting the space, if we put a backslash N, what that's going to do is actually insert a new line character in there that is respected by Notch and gives us the flexibility to manually, if we want, drop in those new lines. So I could put another one after my corner and have a lot more control than might be obvious the first time you're trying to use this.
This is a great moment for me to be annoying and say, like, Elbers, allow me in. I think I can actually move this text for you back, left, or right.
This is perfect.
One of those moments where, yeah, exactly.
Okay, for folks that are about to have their minds blown, which is everybody, I think. We talked about this idea that zero tier, which I highly recommend everyone go check out. If the website, I believe, is just zerotier.com. And I'll put a link in the chat for that. Zerotier.com. Which allows us to create a virtual private network between my machine and Armin's machine, which then allows us to actually have him remote edit my notch block from his system. So what we should do is I should show your screen as you're getting connected to my notch block, I think, right?
Yeah, sure. Could work. Or we can look at your screen as well. I mean, either or if you show me mine, I'll just explain how the connection is done, and then we can switch back to yours to see the actual changes taking place.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to bring up your screen for a moment here.
Yep.
Okay, great. You're live on screen now.
So I'm running the very same block that Elbers is editing. Obviously, the text changes that he's done is not reflecting here because I'm logging into the design that was initially made. So if he made some variables like the text changes inside of the block, this is not something I see. But what I can do, I can move around this text object. So I actually want to pull it a little bit backwards. So I already found it in a node graph. There it is, marked up and ready to go. All I have to go now to access it via Elber's machine is go to Devices, Network Connection, and type in his IP address. In this case, this is the IP address we've gotten from tier 1. And I'm just going to connect. A Notch will gather connections. And I see that there is indeed this very DFX-DLL available for me to connect. So I'm going to connect to it.
And that's on my computer. That's what everyone was looking at inside of the notch top.
So let's switch to your machine now for a sec.
Okay, hold on, let me bring it up. Okay, so then if we switch back to my viewer here. Go, okay, now I'm back on.
Okay, please raise your hands so everybody sees that they're up.
Yeah, this is not a trick. Hold on. Well, I'm gonna try and make my board useful as you do that, so that way they know equals new line.
There we go. So I'm moving it back and a little bit to the side. Tell me if you're happy with this placement.
I kind of dig it. Is it easy to add like a glow to it or something like that? Oh, a glitch effect? Look at that.
Oh, what's going on here? Are we losing the connection again? Oh gosh, what's happening? So obviously, not only you can move around the things in the node graph, you can actually add post effects and such. So Elber suggested glow. I just went for the glitch effect.
The glitch was pretty good.
Yes, we can.
It actually, and let me be real right now. It did scare me for a second, but then I saw it and I was like, oh wait, no. I was like, oh wait, no. That's not bandwidth issues. That's the glitch effect from Notch.
No, but we totally can make it glow. We actually had that for some other text properties, didn't we? So we should totally make it glow. Let me just find the glow node in my node graph. I don't think you actually have to switch through. We spoke about Notch so much Monday. People already know that we had that little system rigged in. So
but I'm going to switch back to your machine for a second. Just like I'm going to hot switch back and forth a bunch. So as you can see, Armin is working inside of Builder on his machine. And the changes he's making there are being sent over our remote network back to my machine. So as he's making those changes, he is like hot patching my Notch block, which is already loaded and like live inside of TouchDesigner.
Yeah, so basically the idea here is that you can further produce your design when you're on location, especially if you're looking at the LED screen or something like that. You actually want to make some repositionings, readjustments. This is literally what we did now. Tiny fraction of adjustments. Would it be optimal to expose the positional values as a exposed parameter? Absolutely not. It's a waste of time because you will probably nudge it for, 2-3 pixels to the left or right, and it's just going to be hanging there amongst the different parameters that you actually need, the ones that you will be working. So instead of exposing these little things, you just go to the network edit session and you network edit in these things. Then you hit save on Notch patch or on the Notch builder, and then you re-export the block. So this is an important thing to mention actually. For these changes that I just made for Elbrus's scene to actually work out and to be logged in, I have to save my Notch builder's session and I have to re-export the block. Then Elbrus will be able to reapply the block that I just made. So I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to save it and I'm going to send it over to Elbers. And at some point he will swap it out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But while we're in a session, this will hold.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's pretty much that. While we're in a session, this holds. If you want this to stick forever, you save it, re-export it, apply it.
And I think that ties into another question we had in the chat, which is, are you able to expose new parameters live, or do you have to rebuild the block for that? I believe we tested that.
You should be able, in our effects player, and I think in some media servers you actually can do that. I cannot vouch specifically for TouchDesigner, but this is maybe this could be a test we can run later on in the stream. But from our side, that's an option. It's just a question if the media server or bespoke media server have integrated this specific property that we offer.
Yeah. And I think the big thing that you said there that was really important was that these changes are live but not committed. So
yes, we are reflecting those changes.
Exactly. I'm reflecting what is up on Armin's system, but when we're done here, he has to save it, re-export the notch block for me, then when I load it in, I'm all done and set. So don't think that just because he's changing it here, like, it's magically saved on my side. Like, it's close to magic. No. It's a kind of magic, but we still need to save, re-export the block, and bring that in.
I cannot speak for TouchDesigner because I'm very new to this, so that's why I'm super excited to be here with Elbers, because I'm learning as we go. I know that, for instance, in the Sky's media server, if you re-export the patch and you drop it in the same location with the same name, it will just automatically refresh itself in the background. So you don't need to quit the media server. It literally does everything in the background, and you're good to go as you progress. It might freeze up for a second because it's literally recalculating things. But aside of that, you're just going further with your workflow. So again, I'm going to export this now, and I'm going to make this available for Elbers. At some point, you will grab this, but I'm going to keep it in session so these changes we made stick.
Perfect. And from the TouchDesigner side of things, you are able to do a lot of that same things that you're mentioning, Armin, with this guy. So you could, if we were on the same computer or even like remotely close, you could save the patch, and I would just hit the reload button on mine, and it would just cycle everything back in. So I don't know if it's I don't know if that disguise one sounds a little bit like I
think in a perfect world we would be sharing a folder over network where I would be accessing your hard drive of sorts where you keep all these files. So I would just drop it in next to the original or on top of the original, and I would be like, Elbers, keep your hands off the keyboard for a second. It's going to update now. Just be aware, and then we're good. Cool.
So I hope everyone's mind's blown, because that is like that. I think that's super cool. That's super hype that from halfway across the world, Armin can like hot patch a running live notch block.
This is just a fraction of what the network editing does. So for the ones who actually got interested in this a little bit more, I would say head to Notch VFX YouTube channel. There's a network editing tutorial. So this allows you to do much more than just making alterations. You can switch through layers if you exported a block with multiple layers. You can control time from media server towards builder. So if you have a camera, let's say on a dolly, and you see that in TouchDesigner, you can see the very same dolly slide in builder, so you can work in parallel, so you actually see exactly what media server sees. Same with the stuff like baking. So if you're baking lights, you will actually see those lights reflected and baked in the media server too. Obviously, again, the saving, re-exporting is necessary, but all the bakes, all the changes, they are all reflected. So this is quite a powerful workflow when it comes to team working and making adjustments on location.
I think it's super sick. It's one of the coolest features recently that I've like. Especially over the zero tier makes it, the remote network editing was like sick to begin with. The fact that you can do it like halfway across the world is like double sick, I think.
Yeah, it's I see we are almost in like same room when we are using zero tiers. This is great. This is great.
So with that said, let me see what we got here. Hey, Simplo, thanks for joining us. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. If you're coming in like halfway on this bad boy, let me just give you a quick little explanation. Monday, Armin was building a fantastic little like virtual game show environment stage. Today we've been importing that into TouchDesigner, getting our project set up. Friday we're going to have this as like a live installation that's going to be running that everyone can play with while we're taking Q&A and just having a good time chatting about it. And as you can see, we're basically hot patching this live. So here we are. We're back here now. So let's say we've got that set up. I'm probably just going to go ahead and quickly patch these game names in. Let's do, what is that? Game name 1, score 1. And I can give these names. So I think we said one of them was going to be Children of the Null. We'll just go with that for now.
Yep, one of those was definitely Children of the Null. I really dig that name.
That's a good one. And let me find where this game is. There's Children of the Null. Hey. So we got Children of the Null here, and then the score text. This one is probably going to be our maze, so it'll be score. You know, this will be your lives, maybe. Lives 5 out of 5. Great. Now, I'm not going to sit here and rinse and repeat for the next hour of literally me dragging and dropping and like naming things. You guys are more than capable of doing that. And also, you'll have this project for reference. We're going to release all these projects as downloads on Friday. So by all means, you can hop in there and see kind of how everything is put together. But one of the interesting things that I want to start connecting up to is Twitch chat. This is what, you know, one of the main functionalities here that we're thinking about doing. And what I thought would be a fun one to do live is the arcade scene switching. Because this one Armin I know is super excited for. And it'll be a really good agent of chaos, I think, is the live scene switching.
Excellent.
So, as I'm approaching this idea of live scene switching, I know there's a couple stages that I got to go through here. One of them is get my Twitch commands, separate the commands that we're going to use for switching these scenes. Then I have to count up those votes because we're going to have some kind of counting system like we mentioned earlier. So, you know, maybe the system I'll build is that whichever arcade command hits 10 votes, we switch to that. And then it resets the count, and then whoever gets the 10, we switch to that, rinse and repeat.
You should probably mention, if you haven't yet, that we have a little telltale with the color code. And probably get to that at some point. So every single arcade has a primary color. And if we were to look at the E10 color wheel, so there's primary, secondary, and so on and so forth color. So when you mix two primaries, you get the secondary. Oh, actually, you can see there in the corner as a test card. So there's
true.
The very circle or the triangle in the center, it's the primaries. When you mix the primaries, you get the secondaries. So basically, with that said, anytime you would see those LED panels with the trichette, this fancy lines, squiggles, turning to another color, you have an indication that you are about to be dropped out from the game you're playing to some other game. And if you are good with your color matching, you actually can predict that it's going from yellow to red, if it's becoming orange. If it's going from yellow to green, it's going to be blue. Yeah.
So we're going to set that all up, and that's kind of exactly in that voting chain where not only am I counting the votes that are coming in, I'm going to be averaging out those votes per arcade game against the total number of votes that we've gotten in to then decide which kind of color direction I'm going to lean in. Now, I'm not going to make if you're someone in the chat who knows the difference between, you know, the deep fundamental difference between sRGB and RGB and YUV and CMYK, you're not going to like what you're about to see because I kind of brute force it. But if you're a normal citizen of planet Earth, you're going to be like, wow, sick. That works really well. So I'm going to preface that a little bit here. But with that said, so we have... Sorry, go ahead.
No, we have terms for these in Notch World. So you're talking about Notch Trooper and a Notch Vader in the color palettes. So if you're a Notch Trooper, you probably will enjoy that. And if you're a Notch Vader, you might have some comments for Albers. But
you're going to have a lot of...
being Notch Troopers here.
Send your comments to noreply at interactive... No, I'm just joking. I'm joking. So we've got the Twitch chat part of it. Parse the commands. We're going to count them somewhere. And we're going to use the count to balance between the colors. And then we're also going to have that counter trigger changing our element here. Sounds like a lot, but we don't have to worry. And usually the first way I approach making this, I usually make my functionality first and then make my controls or my signals coming in control that functionality. Because if you don't know what you're going to control and how it needs to be controlled, you're just parsing the wind as far as I'm concerned. So I know that this is going to be a -1 if we're on arcade 2. It's going to be a 0 if we're on arcade 1, and it's going to be a 1. So I need a range of -1 to 1. So I'm going to go ahead, even with something really simple, I'll make a constant chop here, and I'll put a null after it, and immediately just start referencing that null for my arcade camera switch here. So now I have this parameter here, and just by changing this between -1, 0, and 0, or and 1, that is, I'm saying the number 1 a lot, which is really like tripping my brain out. 1, 0, -1. Great. So how do we go about actually changing this? So I know that I'm going to have 3 arcade commands coming in, and once I turn this hot, I'll put the commands into that. If you look on the little template we have on the Twitch, it says instructions for games will be posted here. I'll post the commands there very shortly on like how to deal with it. But I know that I want to keep probably a lot of the logic close to the notch block itself. I like to have my web parsing things just focus on web parsing and cleaning up the data, and then they just immediately send those triggers to whoever needs them. I don't like to keep a lot of state machine and functionality logic inside of the areas where I'm doing web parsing. So this would be another great place where I would go ahead and make custom parameters for my arcade votes coming in. And for these, I would probably go with simple pulses, because as you guys in the chat are going to be saying like exclamation mark this or exclamation mark that, I just want to take those and redirect those and say, plip, 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 here's our votes coming in. So I can go ahead and make one called Arcade 1. I'm going to make another one called Arcade 2. And I'll make a final one called Arcade 3. Now, if you're looking at my custom parameters and you're like, my guy, that's looking a little bit messy, you know, never hesitate to just drag and drop again a lot of the stuff inside the component editor. So maybe I can grab my scene switcher, move it farther down the list a little bit. A really cool thing you can do is add spacer lines in between. So I can say if I wanted a spacer, like a little line break in between the arcade voting buttons and like the rest of the controls, I could click on scene switcher and then click this section on button here. And you can see we get this nice little extra line break for ourselves, just to visually help us make this less insane. So I've got my 3 arcade button voting system here. So this is where I would go back into the network. If we look at our parameter chop, we can see Arcade 1, Arcade 2, Arcade 3 are right here ready for us. I'd probably pull out another select chop, grab out those 3 arcade channels, and then plug them into something maybe even as simple as a count chop, which will take those pulses and basically incrementally count. You know, so for example, we start to get a lot of votes for Arcade 1, or then, you know, a couple for Arcade 2 trickle in, and then like a bunch for Arcade 3's coming in hot. I can keep a counter of these elements. So now that's really good. One thing I'll probably do is set my counter to clamp, because realistically, once I hit a certain number of votes, I'm going to trigger the scene change and I want to reset it. So I don't really need this count to run on forever. I definitely don't need it to do something like loop. Or I just want it to go from 0 up to my threshold for changing the scene, and then I'll just reset it myself. So I'll set this to something like 10 for now. And this is really another thing that you have to be conscious of when you're working with Twitch interactions, is you want to keep thresholds readily available to change. So that means avoid hard coding them in scripts, avoid not exposing them, because you may do an event and you estimate that a couple hundred people show up, all of a sudden thousands of people are up in the Twitch chat, and it can completely disintegrate any of those thresholds you set if there's 1,000 people instead of the couple hundred that you expected. The vice versa is also real. Maybe you expected a couple hundred, maybe only like 50 people show up, and all of a sudden you had these really high thresholds set to make effects happen. You really want to have these kind of thresholds readily available to change. So we'll go ahead and leave this at 10 for now. I think that's fine. You know, a good thing that I always do is I always just put a null at the end of the chain, just so for sanity and good development practice. Nulls are a good thing. So let's actually start with the first place we can start is setting up this trigger. So what I'm going to do is set up a chop execute dat. And this is going to let me monitor the values of the channels that I have here, my vote counts, and trigger a quick little Python script based on whatever the values are. So I have my chop execute. I'll take my count chop and drag it and drop it onto the chops parameter. And I'm going to go ahead and hit edit. Now my mighty Sublime Text 3 window pops up, and I know that I'm really concerned with the value changing itself. I'm not concerned with, values going from 0 to 1 or values going from 1 to 0. I actually want to know what the count of those values is. So I'm going to type my little bit of Python code into this on value change area here. Now, folks in the chat, my peoples, don't be afraid of Python. Python is not an alligator. You should be afraid of alligators. I don't know if there's any Archer fans in the house, but after watching Archer, apparently alligator, they're basically dinosaurs, that still exist. So just think about that. That's something you should be afraid of. It's the danger zone. Python is not something you got to be afraid of. Python is really easy, and especially in TouchDesigner, I always say, a little bit of Python goes a long way, and that's what we're going to see. So first thing I know is that these are some of the variables that I have access to inside of this function. I'm just going to go ahead and print them. Let's imagine that I didn't already build this and I have no idea what's going on. I'm just going to start printing a few of these. So I'm going to print channel, comma, and val. And if you scroll up to the top, you can actually see here a little bit of like mini documentation. So channel is the channel object, val is the numeric value of that kind of sample. Let's go ahead and save this, hop back to TouchDesigner. I'm going to hit Alt and P to open up my text port. Alternatively, you could go to dialogues at the top and click on the text port up here. And we can actually see some chat coming in here live. We got our friend VJ Dr. Mojo saying, coming from GLSL world, Python is super annoying. Hey, listen, I'm not saying Python is the best language on the planet. I'm just saying it's not something to be afraid of, especially if you're coming as a designer or a non-programmer into the scene. It's a little bit goes a long way. So now let me try and trigger some of these commands and start seeing what it's printing out. So I can see these values are getting printed out. That's pretty good. What I wish I could see was the name of the channel. Now this is where, like I said, a little bit goes a long way because I know a channel is an object. So I could go to something like the derivative TouchDesigner wiki, look for channel object, and then learn a little bit more about it. But since we are on a clock here, I know that if I type in channel.name and hit save, all of a sudden when I go through and click these buttons here, because we hit our max here. Let me reset my counter. We can see now as I hit it, not only do I get the name of the voting channel that just came in, I also get the value. So now it'll be really easy for me to do something like, say, if my value is 10, so if any of my vote counts hit that trigger, check the name of the channel, and then set the value of my camera very, accordingly. Very accordingly. That should be I should put that on a business card. Very accordingly. And we actually got a question in the chat. Is it true to use C++ over Python, though in instances that repeat multiple times or loops? I don't understand the question is my straight up answer. But I think what you're trying to get at is Python really slow when you're doing a lot of iterations? Yes, it can be. And that's why I always say it's better to go through and try to build networks with chops, especially on the logic side, because you're just going to get higher performing networks, and keep your Python more as a scripting thing, not a I'm going to build the whole system in Python thing. I think if you approach it like that, you'll always be on the safe side. But worst case scenario is you build out a system in Python, you find it slow, then later during the optimization time of the project, you go back and say, okay, well, I kind of got to take some of this out of Python and put it back into like chops, because chops are basically C++. I wouldn't say everyone like go out and start writing your own C++ operators. I think that's a bit of a mission for a lot of things when chops are readily available and work in most cases. So I've got, I think, all the things I need. All I need to do is put together this quick little script here. So I'll move my text port here, open back up my Sublime, and say if my val equals 10, listen, this is not rocket science, people. If my value equals 10, I'll even just start simple, print do something here. So let's see if as I click through, I guess I move my text port over here. So everything's going normally, and then all of a sudden, arcade1 hits the value of 10, and I get this little do something here command, so that I know if I put my code inside of that if statement, bam, that's my trigger to change the scene. So that's great. I can hop into here and say, okay, well, now I just need to know what scene to change it to. So we know I have arcade 1, arcade 2, and 3. So I start to, you can be tricky or you can not be a tricky human. I'm going to show you, I'm going to tell you the non-tricky, I'm going to show you the non-tricky way, but I'm going to tell you the tricky way that you could do it. Because if TouchDesigner developers are something, it's tricky usually. So if you're the non-tricky human, if you're just a straightforward human, you just put more if statements. So you can say if my channel.name equals, never forget, equals arcade1, then I can even say, print switch to arcade1. Then I can say elif, which is else if. So if it's not the first one, also check if it's this one. Channel.name equals arcade2. Again, print switch to arcade2. Elif channel.name equals arcade3. Print switch to arcade3. So now, I'm going to reset this counter and just blast through a couple values. People are voting, party's hype, music's good. And then boom, we get to 10 votes and I get this message, switch to arcade 1. Ooh, and we got some wanna become famous spam. Nobody click on the link. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not in the Twitch chat that has the commands for me to block that. I'm sorry. It is what it is. The internet is a crazy place,
It looks very tempting though. Are you sure I shouldn't click it?
I love all the crazy characters they use. I'll say that. I hope there's someone on the other end listening. That's my hope sometimes. So we've got this kind of getting set up here. So I have my triggers here to switch between them. So now in the non-tricky universe, I know that I have a little constant chop here. I have a little control, and all I have to do is set it to -1, 0, or 1. So as a good human, I'm just going to give this a name first. I'm going to call the operator scene switch, just so that it's a little less. I don't like it when I see op constant 1, dot par. It's like, what does op constant 1 do? It's op scene switch. So then I can just hop back into my script and say, you know what? So instead of doing these prints, actually I'll leave the prints anyways. I'll say op scene underscore switch. That gets me a reference to the operator. So it does a little name search for the operator, gives me back the whole operator object. I know that operators have something called a parameter list. So if I say dot par, I'm now going into the parameters of that operator. And then once I'm there, I can say dot again. And to get any of the parameters from anything in TouchDesigner, all you have to do is hover over its name, and you'll see, I can't move the mouse to show you, but you'll see under, there's a little box that pops up with these names. Like you can see name 0 and value 0. Those are what are called the scripting names. So those means that if I do dot par dot value 0 or dot name 0, I can directly be controlling that parameter or getting its value. So in this case, I want to change the value of this. I want to change value 0. So I can hop back into my script. I do op par dot value 0 equals, and if I remember correctly, arcade 1 was 0, right? Arcade 1 was 0, -1 is arcade 2, and 1 is... I don't know if anyone else is like this, but all the Arrested Development fans out there, do you ever just hear the quotes of the characters in your head? Because I always hear Lucille Bluth quotes in my head. Armin, are you an Arrested Development fan?
Yeah, I actually like the doctor. What's his name? The husband. He's my favorite character.
Tobias Funke. Amazing.
He's amazing, man. He's amazing.
And so I heard... Yeah, go ahead.
No, if I hear anyone, it's him, because I can relate to him being what he is. Being so weird.
Because I just heard subliminally in my head, Lucille Bluth saying, "I don't understand the question, and I won't respond to it." When it comes to which scene equals which channel equals which number. But regardless, we'll just set this because you're gonna get the project file with this set up correctly.
To be honest, as a designer, because I'm more a designer, I know zero code, and I'm quite proud of the fact that I know zero code, because in Notch you don't have to, and you still do cool stuff. I relate more to Parks and Recreations Andy, whereas I don't know what's happening and I'm too afraid to ask now. So
that's a good one. I like that quote. I like that quote.
But however, if you do this once in a while, I think it becomes more and more clear. So I can recognize 100%. That there's very solid logic. It's just wrapping your head around when you just start. So if you never did Python or you never did coding, you just need to invest a bit of time, I think, to get started.
And I think that's a great point that you're bringing up, which is that, and that's kind of what I mean when I say a little bit of Python goes a long way, because it's not like you have to really learn Python. You just kind of learn a couple like little things, and then to your point, it's a lot of patterns. You know, once you know how to access a parameter, you know how to access every parameter, because every parameter access is the exact same, except I just change the name on the end of this little statement.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I like how you described this. You speak the code, you literally explain what it does. So it's almost like writing a sentence of what you meant. And one of the cool things is, you know, I hope folks are seeing, I know I haven't like brought it up a lot, but like this is really where it becomes such a fabulous combination to use TouchDesigner and Notch together. Because to do this inside of Notch would probably be tricky. You know, I know we can do some JavaScript scripting, but you know, Notch is not really an environment that was made for, hey, let's build out a really complicated state machine that accepts Twitch, you know, inputs and voting, and like, you know, that's not what Notch is made for. And similarly, how TouchDesigner, you know, doesn't have a lot of the same rendering features that Notch has. The combination of the two is so dreamy, because I can bring in all the stuff that you're building. Like, look at the beautiful reflections on the floor, nice glows, animated characters, and then I can build those state machines and logics that then kind of commandeer the operation here. Yeah, and to further up your point, it's actually valid reason to collaborate with people. I, for one, know zero about code, but if I know people like Elbers, I know that this actually can happen. All I have to do is from my side design, and he will take it much further. And if he needs design, he can call up someone like me. So the horizon already expands quite a lot, because Touch is great at making systems. However, it would take probably much longer to build designs. Vice versa with Notch. So there's a handshake, not only if you're one man's team, but if you actually look for partners in crime.
100%. I can't agree more. That it's a dream come true, really. That's my feeling. So I mean, like, really with that, and here, let's be real. Like, you could have taken this and just copied and pasted it 3 times and just changed the numbers, and like, it's like I'm saying, you don't need a lot of Python. You just copy and paste the first thing like 3 times. But we essentially have this voting system set up now where if I clear out my count here, set it back to 0, and I can watch the scene now, and let's see if it does it. You know, we get some votes. We can see in my text port, votes are building up. And then let's say we want to go to arcade 1. Boom. I hit 10, change the parameter, swings that camera around. We're in there.
I'm super excited to get an option to do that via chat. Do you think we're gonna be able to rig that in as a test today?
I'm gonna make it happen. I won't let the chat down. That's what we're gonna do. Now, what it means is I might blast through the color thing very quickly now, because I'll just explain what I did in the color thing, which was I took all of the. So I'm gonna make a math chop, because I'm not good at math, but math chop is is the healthiest operator that you could put in, you know, your daily vitamin toolkit. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to calculate a quick total number of votes, then use that total number of votes to divide the current amount of votes, which then gives me kind of like an average of, you know, most of the votes are leaning to red, most of the votes are leaning to blue, etc., etc. Now I could go ahead and say, okay, well, combine all the channels. Let me add them together. That's my total number of votes. Let me make another math chop here so that I could take my current count and then divide them by the total number of votes. So I'm going to combine chops, divide, And that gives me a nice fraction of, I can see that 50% of the votes, a little bit over 50% of the votes are for Arcade 1 right now, 20% for Arcade 2, and 26% for Arcade 3. And if you're doing data viz with like Twitch data, this is a good way to start. So then what I can do is take something like this, and this is where I would say, color experts in the chat, give me a little bit of blinders here, because I'm just going to do it the really quick and easy way. I'm going to make a constant for each color that I have. So I know that I want a red color. I know that I want a blue color. And the final one was a yellow one, if I remember correctly. Which...
Yeah, the primaries is red, blue, yellow.
How do we make yellow? I'm just going to pull it out here. There we go. Oh yeah, it's our... Okay, there we go. There, and we got our yellow. Then what I'm going to do is, this is a nice little trick here, is I can now take these levels and use them as opacities for each one of these colors, and then I'm going to add all the colors back together. So an easy way to do this is grab a level, put it on the end of each one, put a composite top afterwards, because I want to take all three of these, add them together, and then take these individual Arcade 1, 2, and 3 ratios and use those as my opacities here. So there's my Arcade 1. And I think I'm doing the colors not in the right order, but that's okay, because I do want to get to Twitch chat control very shortly. And I can update the color order in a moment. But you can already see, like, just by taking those ratios, applying with the opacity, we can see because there's way more votes for the red channel.
Yeah, we're mixing
overall
now yellow
hue
with red.
Exactly. My overall hue is going to be leaning red, even though there is still a mix of that other colors in there. And you can see if I start, clicking these votes for Arcade 2, I start leaning more towards blue. And then it's just a matter of taking this color, using something like a top to chop, which is a great little tool that takes textures and gives me channel data back as a, so I can take the values of that RGB color. And I like to go to the crop area and switch the crop to pixel, because all I need is 1 pixel since this is all the same color. I'm going to put a filter after this just to smooth it out a little bit. And then put a null and reference this onto my RGB. Now in this case, I have my RGB exposed on the top level custom parameters. So I can just grab these, drag and drop R to O. Grab this, drag and drop. My mouse cursor is freaking out a little bit here. What do we got here? Oh God. Okay, I think I got my mouse cursor back. I got my mouse cursor back. Hooray, hooray. Let me split this pane real quick. Map these. R to R, G to G, B to B, and A to A. So now we can see my colors are getting updated in... Oh, I didn't map this yet. Oh, let me map that too real quick. Split that. And let's grab this. Map it to R. And let's just do expressions for now. Okay, cool. So now we've got it all mapped out. And I know I'm moving quick because I do want to get to the Twitch. I want to get the Twitch chat fun coming in here. So now we can see, like, if I was to open up my little voting system here. Let me reset our counters. As people start voting, it's going to start fading between the different colors based on those different votes. And then eventually, bam, it's going to switch over. And actually, I nailed the yellow one. Yellow is on the right side. So we done good for that one. So, Twitch voting. Let's figure out how we're going to get this Twitch voting in. So we know we've got the functionality side of the kind of like arcade switching element built in. And this is where I like the whole custom parameters element of it, because then it means that when I go to focus on building the chat parsing, I almost don't have to care about the functionality, because I know the functionality is behind this interface layer. And all I have to worry about is getting Twitch command and clicking on button. That's like my next brain migration is get Twitch command, click on button. So let's go back up. We know we can go to our Twitch area here. And we're not going to build the whole Twitch connection from scratch just because I mentioned, this is already an existing component you can download from our site. You're going to get this project later, so I'm not going to do the whole authentication, handshake. That stuff is pretty well documented in the script. But what I am going to do is go down to this area where I actually receive the message. And I'm going to talk through this script a little bit and probably write some of the end of it and then tell you how that kind of connects up to the dots here. So one of the things that we do here is when we receive a message, it's going to trigger this onReceiveText callback. And a callback is just a fancy word for a Python function that runs when an event happens. Fancy. There's nothing... If there's nothing I love more, it's making fancy things less fancy. And that's one of them. A callback is just a function that runs when an event happens. And this event happens to be when I receive a message from Twitch. Now, the first thing we're going to see here, which is not super related to our parsing of the commands, but when you're talking about a system like this, one of the really important things you should do is always read the developer documentation for connecting to APIs. Because one of the things that happens here is every once in a while, which we can probably see inside of my little chat log here, I get a ping command from tmi.twitch.tv. And what that means is that because a WebSocket connection is an open connection, it's not like I just say, hey, Twitch, like, what's good? And then they say like, oh, not much. This is an open connection that's always active. And because Twitch has servers and they're paying money for them, if the other side is not alive anymore, they're going to start closing connections to try and save bandwidth. And it's very common when you're working with WebSockets that there's a ping pong situation that happens. And that means that the server sends a ping to me to check if I'm still alive, and I have to answer with a ping or a pong back to it to say, hey, don't worry, still here, we're still good. It's almost like a little bit of a web connection heartbeat. And if you don't send the pong, so in this case, they send ping and I send pong, if you don't send it, after like missing one or two pings, they just close your connection and you just stop receiving chat messages. So it's always really important to think about this kind of stuff. And you can see I've built this in here where if the message coming in is a ping message, don't worry about anything else. Just send back a pong message and say, I'm still alive, I'm still good. Now, inside of the other condition, which is like, okay, so this is not a ping message. This is a real message. The first thing to know is that these messages are formatted as IRC messages. And you can tell that because you're going to see a lot of colons that divide the different part of the message. So we have like these long messages coming in. I mean, you can see some examples here. These are all the chat. These are live chat right now. So we see the username at the beginning. We can see a longer version of the username. We can see what kind of command it is here. It says priv message. That means it's a message in the chat. We can see what channel it was posted in. So right now we're in our Twitch channel, which is Interactive Immersive HQ. Rajat's given me a chatception here. And then we can see after the last set of colons, the message is always the last part of that. So this, and it's only like I was saying, it's only a couple lines of parsing that we need here. We don't need anything crazy fancy. First thing we want to do is take this message and split it every time we see a colon. That's the first step. And what we'll see here is if I print out the broken message is what I call it here. And if folks in the chat, this is the time, feel free to start like chatceptioning me because then we'll have this stuff coming up on screen. So we can see here, this broken message is essentially a list in Python of the different chunks of this longer message. So we can see first section doesn't have anything. Second section has usernames and like commands. And third section is our message. And that's really just what the rest of this parsing is breaking up the little pieces from inside here. So I can see that if I wanted to get the user message, I already know that it's the last element in the list always. So I can say broken message, use a pair of square brackets, -1. That's always going to give me the last element, and that's the message. I can also get the username by taking the second element in the list. So if we look at our list here, the first element's always empty just because there is a colon at the beginning. And I get the second element, which remember in Python, lists start from the number 0. Everything starts 0, 1, 2, 3. So 0 is your first element, 1 is your second element. Always keep that in mind, 0-based index. And then essentially what I want to do is once I'm inside of this element here, I just want this first chunk. And what you can see is a common pattern where there's a username and then an exclamation mark and then more stuff. So I can say, hey, you know what? Every time I get this, cut off at the first exclamation mark. And that's what I have here, which is .split at the exclamation mark. And then afterwards, I can say inside of square bracket 0 is that after you've done splitting this message every time there's an exclamation mark, give me the first element. And the first element is always going to be that username. So then I can say, instead of printing this broken message, I can print username, comma, user message. Oh boy, hit enter too many times. So now we can see Armin works, says hello. I could type something. Hi. My chat's gonna come in here. You know, everyone's coming in. And now we can see we're really quickly, without too much hassle, parsing down these messages. So then there's only one thing left to do, is that we want to find command messages. Because what you're gonna find with a lot of Twitch interactions is you don't want to just take words. You don't want people to just type up, down, left, right, because then you're going to have people typing sentences that have nothing to do with the chat commands, and they're going to be firing off chat commands. So a really common thing that's been happening on the Twitch scene is using special characters to denote your commands. And what I found to be, and listen, I'm no Twitch culture expert here, is just what I've seen is exclamation mark is a very common one. So you'll have exclamation mark and then your command name. So maybe exclamation mark hello, exclamation mark goodbye. And then those will kind of be the command keywords that you're looking for. Now this might look very daunting if you're new to Python. If you're more experienced in Python, this is just a straight up list comprehension. All it does is it goes through every word of the message that we get back. So we can see 4 user message in user message.split. This takes the whole string, the whole sentence that you type. Every time it sees a space bar, cuts it into a new word. And then it checks to see if that word starts with an exclamation point. If it does start with an exclamation point, what it does is it gets rid of the exclamation point, leaves the rest of the word, and then creates a list with all of the commands that it's found. So a good example is I'm also printing command list down here. And actually what probably makes more sense is let me print all of these together. So now if you're typing in the chat and you type anything like that's just a sentence, what we're going to see is the parsing is going to put your name, your message, but then on the end of it, we're going to have a list that has your little commands. So we can see, Diego sends, this just says just a sentence. T Wonku typed red, green, and blue. So we can see that not only do I have, everyone is children of the null as far as I'm concerned. But you can see how this is what I always say. Listen, folks, you don't have to jump from 0 to 10,000 all at once. Think about these things in little steps. You build them out logically, and your life is going to be easy. So you can see Armin did something here, but because there was no word, it's not a command. So it's like not bad. Now I will say here's the thing you should also keep in mind. If you're finding that situation a little bit confusing, literally last week I wrote a blog post just about that one line of parsing. So if you go to Interactive Immersive IO, it's literally the biggest thing. It's parsing Twitch commands in TouchDesigner. and I give a nice explanation of like, it's literally, I took that line right out of the code. I'm like, this is what this line does. Talk about list comprehensions, how it works. You're covered. So don't worry. If even if you're confused at that, hop onto our blog, check that out. But now we know that we have this list that is going to have all of our word commands in it. So what I could do is do a for loop where I go through every item in the list and then try to do something with it. So what can I do with it? In this example, I had both a FIFO built out here with each of the command names after it, and then a button with each of the command names in it. Excuse me. And the reason I did this is because then what I can do, let's get rid of the FIFOs for this. You can look at those later, but let's say we want to try and click on the button for the command. The really cool thing we can do here is if I name all of my buttons that I've made here with the same name as the commands that I'm searching for, I can say find the operator with the name of the command and then dot click it. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Nothing crazy here. Find the operator that has the same name as this command, click on it. So if, for example, you all in the chat were to start typing, here, let me put a little counter here so we can see some of these coming in, but any of these words that you see here on my screen, so up, down, left, right, arcade 1, arcade 2, arcade 3, if you start putting those with an exclamation mark and those keywords, we're going to start seeing these counter kind of ramp up as you're all typing in there. But exclamation point on the beginning, not on the end. So I can type in one here. I can say like, hey, what I want to say. I want to say arcade 3.
So this is interesting. There is a protection in the chat. You cannot send the same message straight away. There's 30-second interval.
And you should be careful because there's a lot of chat mechanics around who can type in the chat. Because, for instance, we're right now in the normal mode of Twitch chat. But if you start going to bigger channels, they'll have things called slow mode, which only lets you type even, so you can't spam. It's basically like spam prevention, so people can't like copy and paste the same thing over and over again. You'll have other ones that have sub-only mode, so only subscribers can chat in those channels, which then takes the amount of noise down even more. So these are all things that you want to look through and be aware of as you're working with Twitch chat. Now, we've got this set up.
So then a question.
You got a question.
Is there a difference? So let's say T1Ku did 2 commands, left. Mm-hmm. Does it read any different if there would be separate messages? Basically, it just takes account for any message. It doesn't care if it came from another user. It just counts how many times it showed up, correct? I mean,
that's hypothetically what it should do, yes. Hypothetically, it should just count. It makes a list, and then it just goes through the list. It doesn't really care what's in the list. Now, you might have situations where what I think is happening is when you have, for example, I saw Rajat posted tick 1 a bunch of times. And this is something that's a little bit more on the advanced TouchDesigner side of things, but also really applies here, is you should avoid repeat actions on the same frame. So likely what's happening here is the reason it's not counting every single repeat command is it's actually trying to, but since it's literally pushing the button on the same frame, it basically only counts it once coming out of the output of that button. So this would be one of those things where as you're building the system, make sure you test it. If you see that you do need that subframe accuracy, maybe buttons aren't the best thing for you. Maybe actually doing it more inside of Python is better because then you can get that subframe accuracy. So these are things to just be aware of and test as you're going through. I think in most cases, though, you probably don't want people being able to game it anyways. Like, you don't want someone typing the same command 10 times in a message and being able to like just warp the whole game and like switch the arcade on their own. So in this case, I would say that's like a fine. That's a fine situation.
That's exactly why I asked, because this is good for us in this case, because everybody should be tackling in with this.
So we're at this point. Twitch chat's coming in. You know, I didn't do anything crazy here. Like we said, we had a very simple parsing script. It takes the exclamation point commands, tries to find a button to click on. I've got just straight up momentary buttons here. Nothing crazy. I just made a button, switched it to momentary, so that way it's just like a little pulse. And now I have this little chop where I merged all the outputs of my buttons together. Now the cool thing can be that I already have Remember, I did all the logic on the other side. So on this side, all I have to do is take the pulse and click on my custom parameters. So I could say, open up this little chop here, Arcade 1, reference it onto Arcade 1 button, Arcade 2 channel onto Arcade 2, Arcade 3 onto Arcade 3. And there you go. So now, just with that simple drag and drop, our Arcade 1, 2, and 3 commands are now hot patched into the actual rig. So if you are, I know you're, I don't know why I say if you are out there, because it's one of those, yes, you are out there if you hear this, and if you aren't out there, then there's no reason for me to say it. So all in the chat, feel free to start firing Arcade 1, 2, and 3 messages. I'm going to reset this counter. What do we got here? Oh, this cookie dependency is fine. You should be able to now fire exclamation point Arcade 1, Arcade 2, Arcade 3, and we're going to see, I'm going to open up this counter here, and we're going to see all these things happening. So start firing Arcade 1, Arcade 2, Arcade 3. I can see some votes coming in for Arcade 1. Who's going to win? Who's going to win it? Who's going to win it? I'm going to go, I'm going Arcade 1. I'm voting Arcade 1. And so this is a good example of why that feedback loop is important to be careful of the latency, because you guys are typing, but you guys probably aren't seeing your message trigger until maybe about, you know, I'd be curious to see, like, it's probably about, some folks time it, because I think if you all time it, it's going to be variable. You have some folks that are getting it in like 2 to 3 seconds, some folks in the 5 to 7 seconds, some folks maybe even 10 plus seconds, just really depending on the bandwidth and location. Boom, so we had Arcade 3. We're already in Arcade 3, so that one doesn't count. I'm going to reset the vote. Let's go. I want to see one set of votes. Let's get to Arcade 1. Everybody, exclamation point Arcade 1. Let's do it, chat. I know we can do it. We can pull together to Arcade 1. But we can see as we're putting more bumps into Arcade 1, our color in the LED is also getting red. We got there. And then however you want to reset this vote, you know, you can make it a part of the existing system that we have or something extra. From there, it's all really just personal preference. So, I know we've been flying, but if you have any questions, drop them in the chat, because we do have to start wrapping up pretty soon, probably in the next few minutes. And I can see actually T-Wonku says about 7 seconds for them. So you'll see that kind of feedback loop is something you always want to be careful of, because I get the commands instantly. But by the time you see the video signal of me getting the commands, you got some time. So just something to think about when you're designing these kind of systems.
So while the questions are coming in, can I ask you can you give an overhaul of what we went through? Because there was a lot of information.
Yeah, I know, 100%.
Very fast.
So what do we go through today? So first things first. Working in this environment of containers, putting custom parameters on those containers for things you want to access inside of them, great practice. Because that's going to allow you to do what I just did, which is build functionality somewhere, expose a very simple control for it. I mean, it's basically the exact concept we're using with the Notch blocks. You're building a lot of stuff inside of Notch, and you're like, here's a couple controls for you, bro. And then inside of Touch, I have a few controls, and I don't have to worry about all the things behind that control. And we're doing similar here, because then as you're going through getting things like Twitch chat, which in this case, we're getting through WebSockets, which is connecting to the IRC backend of Twitch. And you'll see when you get this project, there's a whole little notes area up here that tells you how to make your own token, how to enter channel names, how to get more documentation on this process. All that stuff is in the project you'll get on Friday. I basically take those commands, give them a very simple, what I'd call like a lettuce wash. Because, nobody ever washes lettuce that hard. You just kind of like put some water on it before you make a salad. This is the lettuce wash of parsing. And then I just take the parsed out command words, click on some buttons, and then have those buttons routed to any of the other controls that we've built. So what you're going to see on Friday and in the finished project when you guys get it is that's how all of these systems for the maze, for tic-tac-toe, you'll see that all of them have these pulse buttons for controlling the games that are being routed. The Twitch chat commands are just coming in and just clicking these buttons. It's not some kind of like super smart AI system. It's like Twitch command, button. inside of the person who cares about that, then I, parse out and maybe do a little bit of processing on it. And then all of these, so one thing we haven't done yet, which I'll do really quick, is once we have these textures, it's really easy to get them into the actual Notch block. So for instance, right here, if I wanted to, overwrite our little texture behind the thing, what I could do is, let me use a select top just to be easy about it. I'll make a select top here, and I'm going to split my pane just so I can do this a little bit faster. Let me grab my output of tic-tac-toe, which I have all the way down here, and I'll drag and drop this output of tic-tac-toe onto my select top and put relative path. Because now what I can do is, in the exposed parameters that Armin made for us down here, for all of my video loaders, I can say, hey, you know what? Arcade screen 2. I guess it's arcade. This is where my numbers got confused. There we go. Arcade screen 3. Send this rendered texture from TouchDesigner into that position on the screen. And then all of a sudden, my live game that I've made is now embedded inside of my scene. Now I could do that for all the games. The Twitch chat feed is actually really interesting. I'll talk about that just real quick. I really love Streamlabs widgets. I highly recommend, if you're going to be working with Twitch installations, check out streamlabs.com. They got free widgets for all kinds of things like chat, donations, alerts for subscribers. And all you have to do is go to one of them, style it how you want. So this is like just sample messages. These aren't your messages. Style it however you want. You hit this little widget URL copy. In TouchDesigner, it's as easy as making a web render top, pasting in your link, activating it, and then now actually I'm gonna make a transparent background also for it. So now if you guys start chatting, I'm literally gonna see chat messages flying through here. There we go. Armin says hello. Chat, give me a little bit of hype, chat. I know we're getting to the end here, chat, but stay with me. Here we go. And then all I have to do is, where Armin exposed Twitch chat feeds, drag and drop my texture. And then if I went to my grandma corner, for example, all of my Twitch chat is now natively embedded right inside of that content in the Notch block. Is it reading Twitch chat only? I had a quick question in the chat. No. So actually inside of that component, I have an example of how you can actually send messages back from your system. So you could make a very responsive bot system that actually tells people that they're getting their Twitch messages read and that their things are coming, alive. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do in there.
I actually want to come back to one of the points that we already discussed. Yeah. Obviously, for me as a designer, to comprehend all the ins and outs of touch, it's not one day's process. So I think if I was to do something, the best course of action is finding friends. And talking about friendships, I know that you guys launched a very good place to find friends for projects. Maybe you could drop a little mention here, because I think there's a valid reason for touch designers to find Notch designers, or for touch developers to grab a Notch designer and sort of do things together. So I think there's a good platform for that now, no?
There is, and we're gonna do the proper launch on Friday. So folks that know, they already know. We've launched a really cool new job platform which allows people to make profiles, show off your skills, be able to hire each other for gigs and stuff like that. I'm gonna show off that on Friday, just because we're starting to go a little bit overtime now, and I want to see if there's any questions we can answer. But yeah, we'll big announcement Friday. Listen, if you only came in now, big announcement Friday. Come on Friday. But aside from that, community stuff is super important. So for example, you were mentioning Notch has a great YouTube channel. There's also the Facebook Notch user group.
Yeah, the internal team, for instance, is super active in forums. So we have our own forums. I'm sure Notch Bart will drop a link as we speak now. We do have Facebook user group, and we're quite often there as well. It's actually full of good people sharing their work files, experiences, and tutorials that they come up with. This is a good place to hang out. I'm sure same goes for Touch Designer. I just think we have here a good mix of Touch team and Notch team, like people playing with one or the other software. So it's very important to make sure that you guys actually talk amongst each other and share experiences and perhaps collaborate and do something nice. As well, I'm very happy to be here with Elvers, and for instance, the part
the
that
pleasure
he
is
does
mutual,
is
my friend.
so
Pleasure is
above
mutual.
me. Like I
No
wouldn't
way.
know how to.
Come on, bro.
I wouldn't know where to start, but I do. I can do graphics. I cannot do the systems, so it's just cool. Like we handshake so well.
Exactly, and that's the same for me. I'm the opposite. Like systems, crush it. You're telling me to go in there, build content, make it nice, add things. I'm like, I don't know. I think you called the wrong guy, bro. So us being able to work together is like the dream team that we're trying to show the reality, and we are the reality, is what people should know.
Yeah, this is definitely a team game, especially if the project is big and if you're tight with time. So using these two softwares in unison and having people who can do one and having people who can do the other. In a perfect world, obviously you have one person that knows both, which probably happens but not that often. It's a very good way to go. So you just team up with someone from the other side and bring something really cool in the span of the week. We didn't mention this
100%.
today. We spoke about it Monday. We literally worked on this for 2 days each. I had a couple of days to do design bit. Elbers had 2 days to do the integration bit, and here we are putting things together for you live.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great place to talk about. So if you're interested in learning these kind of things, Notch, you guys yourselves have some fabulous courses for learning Notch on the Notch.1 website. Actually, I could probably pull it up here. That's the smart person to do.
Notch.1 we have a Learn tab, and in Learn tab we have e-learning schools. So the initial school, the essential course, is completely free of charge. You learn all the ins and outs of Notch, and if you,
there's our guy.
If you want to pursue. What a horrible picture, but that's me.
No, it's looking good, bro. Looking good.
Oh, cheers. So anyways, once you're done with your essentials, you can hop in for the intermediate. And intermediate is free for our existing users. So as soon as you become a user, if you get a dongle, if you get a license, you're free to go further. Otherwise, there's a minimal fee, I think, required for the intermediate. And we're expanding these courses. And while courses require a little bit more time to make, tutorials literally is done in a day or two. So we have abundance of tutorials available in Notch VFX channel in YouTube. And we actually have a playlist called Community. So if somebody makes something nice, like Elbers does once in a while, you definitely can find something from the community in our channel as well. So we ping back to the community whoever makes something. So the circle of people teaching people is expanding always.
Yeah, and I would say the Notch content is really fantastic. Like it's really high quality stuff. And then if you're interested in learning on the TouchDesigner integration side of things, definitely check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ. So if you go to interactiveimmersive.io, I'll put links in the chat. This is our headquarters, all things interactive, immersive media, and especially if you go to our training area. Which, if we're talking about embarrassing pictures, Armin, this is when I was like still had hair and like big beards and stuff.
No, it's good, man.
I've gone full One Punch Man. I've gone full One Punch Man on us.
I dig the beard, man. Like we align on the beard thing.
Thank you.
I have to give big shout to Elbers because I know virtually nothing in TouchDesigner. However, I went to his school and I checked out the beginner's course, and I actually comprehend things and I can do a couple of things. I can even put in a Notch file but what I really appreciate about Touch is that I can make something cool in Notch design-wise, but then I can bring it to Touch, make a little UI with buttons, and that becomes my control point for DJing, for photo booths, you name it. Whatever you want. And it doesn't really require code that much. So after watching these initial courses, I actually managed to make it happen, which I'm really happy about. Although Python is still a snake that I am yet to master.
It's a snake that will get more annoying with time, but all you need is a little bit to be very effective and powerful inside of TouchDesigner. So I still recommend folks.
Rewards comes with it.
Yeah. And I put a link in the chat to the HQ Pro, which is our online school where we teach everything TouchDesigner, integration related. We've got a great course that picks up, I would almost say it picks up exactly where you leave off your essentials course. And then does the integration side of like, here, now we've got some Notch blocks. Let's bring them into TouchDesigner and like control these bad boys.
I see that there's a couple of comments come in and I want to address them. So are Notch and Unity similar? Notch or Unreal? Well, to be honest, there's different tools for different occasions. So while Unreal and Unity is for game development and it overlaps to motion graphics at some point, Notch is specifically for motion graphics. So you can expect to achieve things much easier and faster with Notch because that's literally the area that it should be worked in, or it's created for. So all of the tools have their strengths in different areas. And to make it short, what are you actually looking for? What is your end goal? And by judging what's your end goal, you can choose the tools. So if your end goal is something that we're doing here with Elbers, obviously Logic's, hands down, TouchDesigner. There is no competition. Motion graphics, most likely easiest and fastest result is Notch.
100%.
And then of course there's all these in between, some virtual productions, and quite a few softwares overlap in those, and quite a few softwares actually handshake in that as well.
I think that's a great point. And, you know, like one of the things that we talk about a lot in the HQ Pro is pick the best tool for the job. And I can wholeheartedly say the best tools for the job that I've found lately, TouchDesigner for systems, Notch for content, kind of a dream team. No bias, no lie.
Well, the fun bit is that
I mean, the only reason we put this stream together is because we believe it. If we didn't believe it, like we wouldn't have done like a whole week-long 3-day event. We would have been like, okay, well, cool. Like
absolutely good point.
We dog food here.
Yeah, it's and the fact that it integrates directly with the support of the blocks inside of the system, that will make your day easy. Actually, then you're not sending NDI textures. You're not sending signals sort of just as a video feed. You have all these controls inside your preferred media server, in this case, Touch.
Yeah. Great. So with that said, we do have to wrap up because we're a bit over time now. So for folks that are watching, I mean, it's one of those things, you're watching. So next session on Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be an exciting time because we're going to prop up the full projects for you. All the Twitch integration stuff is going to be there so you all can play with it. And the fun thing that you could probably even do at home is, because we're going to release those download projects, at the start of the stream, you could download the projects, set up your own Twitch API keys, and you could even have a local version of the same project running that you can kind of like experiment with and play around with live as our system is running live for you as well. And me and Armin will be here co-hosting each other, having a good time, answering your questions about the builds. You know, if you're starting to see things inside the project, so you're like, hey, how does this work? Or how does that work? Or how would I change this to be that? We're going to have a good long Q&A session during that Friday stream. So I can't wait to see you on that one. Armin, is there any last words you'd like to leave folks with before we sign off, my friend?
Create irresponsibly using real-time tools and expect Easter eggs Friday.
Yeah, there's going to be Easter eggs Friday. So, you know, you saw some of the Twitch commands today, but it's going to be even more Twitch commands on Friday. So with that said, yes, we got a question. Kimmy's asking, you mean you are going to drop the project file? We're going to drop it like it's hot, my friend. We're going to drop it like it's hot.
It's going to have little comments all around. It's going to have some assistance sort of assets to make it more clear. So if you haven't watched the Monday stream, do that. If you just jumped in and you haven't seen the beginning of this stream, once it's on YouTube, which is likely straight after.
It's basically straight after, yeah. On YouTube and on Twitch, it'll be straight after.
And then Friday, there's files. So once you have the files, probably all these things that I spoke Monday and what Elber spoke today will make more sense because you literally can be hands-on checking out things. So we obviously, of course, sharing the files.
Yeah. Great. So with that said, I mean, let me switch over to our little 2 setup here. Thanks for joining us, folks. It was a really fun one today. I know I might have melted some brains with the amount of stuff we covered, but it's good. You know, watch the VODs, take it bit by bit, accept the parts you can, and then you'll get the other parts coming soon in the project files. Don't worry.
To what you said, melting brains, I think it's worthy to melt your brains just to know what's out there. And then you know that that's possible. And then you go from there. And then you take your own pace.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it. So with that said, thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern for our final session, the real, I don't know, what do we call it? Like the banana session? I don't know what we call it. I got it.
Good point. How do we call it?
Twitch
Children
chat
of the Node. I mean, that was the
think
most
of the
prominent
name. Tell us on Friday. That's your homework. Twitch chat is let us know. YouTube chat also let us know. So that said, thanks everybody. We'll catch you on Friday.
See you Friday.